Yeah, I just left in some old verbiage. Okay.
This week, through the magic of editing, we take you to...
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we kick off a retrospective of movies featuring Jules Verne's immortal creation, Captain Nemo, with the 1961 film Mysterious Island, directed by Cy Enfield and showcasing the special effects of Ray Harryhausen. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of this winter's Young Captain Nemo from Fievel & Friends Macmillan Books. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. And also in Austin, writer of the long-running underground comic series Halloween Man and winner of the 2018 Best of Austin Award from the Austin Chronicle, Mr. Drew Edwards. Say hello.
Ray Harryhausen's love child as well.
Yes.
I'm going to keep going with that.
Who among us would not want to be that? Finally, in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello, Julia.
Hello, Julia.
Hello. Okay. So Mysterious Island. This is a big switch from Hellraiser. So let me just live it out there.
And I'm so sad that I missed that retrospective.
Although, in a way, it ties together because one of the reasons why Clive Barker wanted to do monster films is because of Ray Harryhausen. So it's however unlikely, it does tie together.
All right. I'll absolutely buy that. Okay, Mysterious Island is a 1961 sci-fi adventure film about prisoners in the American Civil War who escape in a balloon and find themselves stranded on a remote island in the South Pacific. So they start out in Virginia, and by the time they crash land, they are in the South Pacific, clear on the other side of North America. Based very loosely, I think that's not fair. I think there's a lot of elements from the 1874 novel Mysterious Island by Jules Verne, which it was a sequel to two other books. It was a sequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea with characters also from In Search of the Castaways. The film was produced by Charles Schneer, directed by Cy Enfield, shot in Catalonia, Spain, and Shepperton Studios, England. So this is very much actually an English production, at least if you're looking at certainly all of the actors. And it is a big showcase for Ray Harryhausen's stop motion animation effects. And the music was scored by Hammer favorite Bernard Herrmann. So let's get our opening thoughts. We're doing this because I've got this book that comes out in the month of March and involves Captain Nemo.
What day in the month of March, Jason?
Oh, that would be March 12th. March 12th.
Woo.
Yes.
That's soon.
but so I was like, this is a good opportunity for us to look at stuff with Captain Nemo in it. Let's get our opening thoughts. Julia, you've just joined us back again. Let's go. Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll say whatever. So I don't know if you've ever seen Mysterious Island, but what are your thoughts?
I feel like I've seen it, but that's because it's very similar to some of the other things that we've seen that have Ray Harryhausen effects and islands. So
sure.
So I got a kick out of it. It was sort of I'm going to say a little forgettable. Like I just kind of already am going, well, we just watched it yesterday and I'm like, but it's fun. It's about some guys, some mostly Union soldiers, although there's a Confederate soldier that gets thrown in the mix and they don't seem to mind that too much. It's just kind of like, it's all good. We're all fine. They have kind of a little Gilligan's Island adventure that just happens to be interrupted with some giant monsters thanks to Ray Harryhausen. So it's amusing, not too substantial.
Amusing. Okay. So that's your opening thought. Amusingness. Tony, where do you land? Oh, I'm sorry. It was Drew. It was Drew next.
We can go with Tony.
I'm Tony, where are you landing?
Sure. I don't know. This kind of stuff is very nostalgic for me, and I'll watch an infinite amount of Harryhausen and Harryhausen style monsters, anything kind of Robinson Crusoe-esque, anything with Captain Nemo, I'll watch at least once. So all this works for me. It's got a cool cast. I think setting it during the Civil War is kind of an interesting take on it. And the soldiers, I mean, they don't like each other at the beginning. What Julie was saying, oh, there's just one guy thrown in the mix. Like, once they've saved each other, I think that's kind of the point of like, well, we got better things to worry about than if we were fighting.
Yeah, but if it was a different kind of movie, that would have been a huge plot point, that this
Oh,
Confederate
sure.
guy was always kind of trying to, get them.
Well, the fact that there's also a black cast member,
Yep.
that would probably really get that guy's goat in a different movie.
Yeah.
You could make a different movie where that was a big part of this in amongst all the monsters. And I think probably if it was remade, that would probably be a big thing. But as it stands now, it's a fairly breezy movie full. It just has that adventure. There's a certain feel that adventure movies of this time have, and it has all of that. So I really dig it.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Drew, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to kind of echo some of the sentiments that Tony just said. This is one of my more. I watched this movie a lot. Actually, I have it as part of a Harryhausen box set that I got as.
Do you really?
As a gift years ago, and it's actually autographed by the DVD case is actually autographed by Ray Harryhausen.
Aww.
And,
snap! That's awesome.
Yeah. So I like this movie quite a bit. And it's funny, like we just came from the Hellraiser movies, which is like a different kind of nostalgia, and then we hit into this movie, which also has like all kinds of nostalgic feelings. I watched it a lot with my siblings as a kid, and anything with like an island and creatures, and I like Tony. I really like that kind of island of monsters genre.
Sure.
And also the sort of weird war, even though like this is almost like an anti-war, weird anti-war, because there is like a vein, even though it's not dealt with in like a very heavy way, but there is like a lot of lip service given to like war is bad in this movie, which I think is interesting. Certainly viewed, I guess, in the modern standpoint. I mean, this is among the many movies that recasts Captain Nemo as a white man.
Yeah.
And in the modern context, I guess that's kind of problematic, and I'll acknowledge that. But I really did love this movie growing up, and it is out of the Harryhausen canon. It's one of the ones that I tend to go back to a lot, because I just think I like the setting, and I think the creatures in particular are very, very well done, and particularly the giant crab is just really cool.
Wow, thank you. So I came to this oddly enough. I know I had seen it many years ago. I think it's one of the first things I ever saw with Captain Nemo in it, and it's true, he's not playing an Indian. That's for sure, Herbert Lom, but he's so odd, and his language is so strange, because Herbert Lom has this odd. He was a Czech actor, Czech/British, and he has an unusual speaking style. So he's alien. You don't know where he's from. But I come to this movie having read the book like last summer, and I'd never gotten around to reading Mysterious Island before. And I found it two things. First of all, the film as an adaptation, and second, as a film film. As an adaptation, I find it actually pretty good. It has most of the major points of the book. It just also has giant Ray Harryhausen monsters. That's the only thing that is like thrown in from nowhere. It would be nearly impossible to get everything in the book into a movie, because it's a really, really long and detailed book. And this hits a number of the high points, and it's quite satisfying in that degree. Okay, the movie by itself, I know that I'm repeating you guys, but I feel exactly the same way that Tony and Drew do. Anytime you show me a movie where all the guys get together and suddenly they have to explore a valley with secrets in it, or like go on a long adventure, I am down for that. I'm down for the way these movies communicate things. Like, when you think about it, once they're on the adventure, there's no like sniping. Everybody gets along. It's, they're just like working on making stuff. beautiful women land on the beach. Nobody fights over them. Everything is
Nobody
like
rapes them.
nobody. Right? There's none. There's not even in that movie we saw. The Victoriana film where they Lost World. It actually had much more sniping among the crew than this one does, and it makes it really fun because they don't have any drama, and so we're just sort of enjoying them running around. I totally love that. Maybe I wouldn't like it for every film, but for here, I'm totally down with the fact that, look, you're in a universe where everybody just kind of gets along pretty well. They're all
I guess
they're
that's
all
why I
fine.
found it kind of forgettable and unsubstantial. Because to me, the human drama is what makes a film interesting.
I think, though, in some ways, I find that to be a little more realistic when you're talking about guys who are, and maybe maybe I'm naive, but like we're talking about people who are military men, and they're trained to deal with stressful situations. Would they really be sniping at each other? When you're talking about a life or death situation.
Sure.
Well, we've seen a million war movies where there's all kinds of fighting going on amongst the
Yeah,
troops.
the long tradition in American war movies is that the officers actually tend to fight all the time, and that's kind of a cliche that goes back, way into really old war movies because it's just a way to like pad out the story. Now in the book, let me tell you how much of this is actually in the book. That's the thing, the black soldier, Neb, he's totally in the book. Herbert, actually, this whole cast is exactly as it appears in the novel. The only difference is the young one, Herbert, is much younger in the book. In the book, he's like 13 or 14, and so he grows up because they're stuck for like 8 years on the island, so that's the other thing. The movie is compacted. The other big thing is that in the book, Cyrus Harding is literally a genius, and that's the real purpose of the book, is just for Jules Verne to just show off how much like natural shit he knows. So when they land there, everybody is just all enamored of how amazingly brilliant Cyrus Harding is, Captain Harding, because he can do everything. He fashions an astrolabe and figures out more or less where they are. When they need to cut down trees, he figures out how to extract minerals from the ground and smelt metal and make nitroglycerin out of like ash that he creates by burning particular plants, and he fashions a crude communication device so they can
And he's
send
the
Morse code around.
professor
He's the
of Gilligan's
professor.
Island.
He's
So-
exactly the professor.
So what's interesting about that, though, and that's why it's, I guess, probably Gilligan's Island is what it is, but a lot of that I think is what people gravitate to when you talk about like steampunk and
Yeah.
where that from is. A lot of it is kind of also the return to smart people being revered, or
Yeah.
smart people having more of a place. Like, I'm a genius and I can solve this because my intelligence provides me this advantage.
Yeah.
And probably why also a lot of geeky people who go to cons, why that is such an interesting. Not only is it an interesting time,
Yeah.
an interesting way of like, hey, there's all this cool stuff you can do costuming wise, and fielding that whole. It's a cool time period to do, but also, hey, look, it's not that outside the realm to say that the stereotype is like, smart geeky people going to cons, right?
Yes.
That there's this, hey, look, the professor is the hero in this.
Yes.
When you were in school, and I can attest to this because this is me as well. When you were in school, being smart usually was not cool and could get you beat up. But
Yeah.
here, there's this professor guy who's like, hey guys, look, I'm going to show you. I know that I need tough guys around me. You guys are all soldiers, but here I'm going to smelt some metal and tell us where we are in the world and all this stuff. And everybody's like, wow, I am so glad there's a super smart person here.
You raise a really good point. That the universe of this has them worshiping him. Yeah, go ahead, Drew.
Well, and that's a through line into later forms of fiction, because basically you've just described Doc Savage and his crew.
Yes.
You
Absolutely.
know, and
That's true.
the interesting thing about this story though is that you have one guy who's just like a normal genius, then you have as normal as a genius is. That's
Sure,
kind of
sure.
oxymoronical thing to say. And then you have Captain Nemo, who's kind of a mad genius.
Yeah.
Who's like, it represents a different literary archetype.
It is weird that Nemo. It's almost a flaw in the book. I don't know quite what to make of it, because it's so strange and brilliant that Nemo becomes. And in the movie version, it's a slight improvement to explain Nemo's presence when they start encountering weird ass things like giant chickens on this island, and then later Nemo shows up. Because in the book, it's mainly just look how many amazing things the professor can make for the crew as they fashion their home away from home, knowing that they will probably never return to the United States. And then later Captain Nemo shows up. And it feels more abrupt than that. I mean, there's the same clues that they do get here. Like he occasionally will like do something nice for them, or save somebody, or because there's a couple extra characters that are cut out, by the way. The book also, they have a smart dog and a smart orangutan. I'm not making this up. They have an orangutan because and let's get into this in the movie. When they touch down on the island, one of the first thing that happens is when they're looking for a place to stay, they notice these amazing cliffs up in the up on this granite cliff, and they call it Granite House. Big caves there, and in the book, they have to battle to keep those caves with an army of orangutans. And once they kill all the orangutans, they keep one as their house servant. And it becomes a member of their happy family.
I am glad then that there's not an orangutan genocide.
or enslaving. Yeah.
Well, both. I guess. I mean, I know that you got to fight them, but hey, well, good job, everybody. We killed all the orangutans on the island. Yay, humans.
Interesting. I was reading that there wouldn't have been black soldiers in the jail. They would have just become slaves themselves. So really, I'm glad that they don't have orangutan slaves, or that the black soldier doesn't become their slave either, because that could have gone that way too if it was a darker film.
Well, see, the thing is, Verne has some very strange ideas, but also some of them are like one of the strangest and wonderful things about Verne is that he really worships the attitude and the futurism of Americans. So his presentation of Americans in this film is that they are the best that humanity can offer for the future. And so
I'm so sad we have disappointed you.
I know. I wish we could. I wish we could have been, or could be now.
We've come from the future to shake our heads in shame, Mr. Verne.
Where are you going with this, Jason?
I'll tell you. I'm saying that they, the Civil War is a war of great justice, and they're going to stop slavery. Abraham Lincoln is essentially, and it, I don't disagree with that. Abraham Lincoln is a glorious and wise king. Cyrus Harding is a brilliant person in that mold. They count a black man among their number. They treat him as an equal. Nobody gives it a second thought. The only oddball thing that is a Verne thing is Verne still is totally in love with the notion that some men are servants of others and they're good with it their whole lives. So like Neb is treated as a member of the team, but he absolutely positively regards Cyrus Harding as his master. When Cyrus Harding is going to die, Neb is going to drown himself. And that's something that like holds over though from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where you had Conseil, the servant of Professor Aronnax. There's always these sort of squires who just hang out, and it's just a literary conceit that Verne is in love with.
I mean, it's a huge part of colonialism,
for sure.
Also, it's a very I mean, I'm stereotyping, mind you, but it's a very European attitude, particularly of the time. You know, with the way they see class and everything.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm not saying it's objectionable. It's just a part of the literature, but it means that you have the awkward business of Neb constantly talking about Cyrus in a very subservient kind of way. But it's precisely the same relationship that you see with Professor Aronnax and his squire in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Anyway,
None of that's in the movie, though. They're just all adventuring
none of
around.
it's in the movie. That's true. And like I say, they got rid of the orangutan, who was a wonderful. He swept up and he could cook. They taught him to do everything. He even wielded a gun at one point when they had to fight off the pirates. And yeah, it's a fun book, but
it would have been totally different if they hand the orangutan a gun and he's like, "Now's my chance." Bang, 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 bang. Book ends 200 pages early. 200 pages early.
There's another character that's missing from the movie, which is Ayrton. They come across this this diary of a pirate who hanged himself, and it's a guy who left them some stuff. Because at 2 points in this movie do they get caches of helpful material. The first is when they find Ayrton's hideout, and he's already done a lot of work to make the hideout livable. And then he's killed himself because he was so depressed being there by himself. And then later they get a cache of material that Captain Nemo sends to them, but they don't know it's Captain Nemo. But they get a bunch of stuff from the Nautilus. That character who leaves them the first cache, the one who kills himself, that's Ayrton. In the book, he doesn't kill himself. He actually becomes a member of their crew. It takes a while for them to hook up with him. So basically, what you're looking at is a very compressed telling of the book. But I mean, what the heck do you want? That's an extremely long novel. And most of it is just the professor lecturing on what kind of plants to burn if you want to make a proper salve to treat somebody's wounds. So
all the good stuff that really moves a movie along is what you're talking about.
Yes. One of the funniest things in this film, did you guys did you marvel at the accents in this movie? Because everybody's supposed to be American, and practically no one is American.
Well, the women aren't American.
Correct. The women are supposed to be British and are British. But the prisoners who escape at the beginning, who in theory they're all Union guys except for the one Confederate who are in prison, and they steal a balloon and they head up. They're all supposed to be Americans, but really most of them, except for Spilett, the who's a journalist, and Herbert, the teenager, those two are Americans. Everybody else is British, and they're doing their best to keep
the southern accent on and it's funny, usually I think English people actually do better southern accents than Americans, because they don't tend to turn it into a cliche or a cartoon.
Sure.
They just do an accent. But this, I don't know where the hell this guy is supposed to be from.
Yeah, it felt like it went from Cockney to Australian to I don't know what. It was the craziest weird accent that he was doing.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it. It's silly for me to say it didn't bother me, because it's just the kind of thing you expect from films like this. It didn't, that, and he was enjoyable, but he should have just kept his accent. Who cares, but yeah, that character is Pencroft. To be honest with you, I think in the book, he's not even a Confederate. I don't know why they bothered to make him into a Confederate, because in the book he's just a sailor. He's just yet another.
Gives him something to. I mean, there's a for as much as this movie kind of sidesteps the issue of the Civil War, there is some dialogue that gives it lip service. Like when they first get on the island, and he's like, well, I'm in the Confederate Army. And,
that's true.
And then later on, and they're talking about it on the Nautilus, and the captain's like, "Oh, my war will set men free." So like it does give it some texture, even though they don't go as heavy with it as they certainly could have.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really excellent point. And let's talk a little bit about. So we talked about the crew. Let's talk about Nemo, because he does come very, very late in the picture, but we know that he's there earlier on because he does things for them. Joy, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, like from the beginning, they barely make it to the island with the balloon. And in fact, the captain kind of falls off or whatever in the ocean. And so they're not sure that he's actually survived the swim to the island. But when they get to the island, they do eventually find some smoke, like a fire has been started, and they find the captain there. And they're like, "Oh, hey, good job with the fire." And he's like, "I didn't make that fire." And they're like, "No, obviously you did." And he's like, "No, I wouldn't know how to do that even if I had matches." And then he's like, and they're like, "No, you must have." And that's that. They're just like, we're just gonna go with that option, because otherwise we have to figure out who the hell else is on the island. We don't really feel like doing that. And that's it. That's that. They forget about it for a while. And then some pirates come, and the pirates get blown up, and they're like, "Okay, we know we didn't do that." Right. We know we don't have a cannon anywhere in our little Gilligan's Island setup that we've got going. So that's kind of where they start to go, okay. And then Nemo shows up, and they find out that he's got. Now, I never understood why he's stranded there. Like, his Nautilus seems to be working just great in terms of living, and he's got an awesome organ set up in there, and it's gorgeous. It looks like the TARDIS. It's really neat. And then, but for some reason, it's not seaworthy, which I didn't quite get why that was. And so he's stuck there.
What did he say? They talk about him a little bit beforehand, because they introduced the idea of the existence of the Nautilus, because it had been a big story in the newspapers that there was this submarine that had been attacking naval ships, and people regarded Captain Nemo as a mad genius who had been killing people. So a little better than a pirate. And then when they meet Captain Nemo, first of all, he's really cool. Now, bear in mind, this is 1961, so it's only 6 or 7 years after the big Disney version. So they had to create a vision of Captain Nemo that was very, very distinct from that version. They didn't want him to look or anything at all like the version seen there. And what you have is a really original creation. Nemo walks out of the sea wearing a wetsuit and a sort of scuba tank that he's fashioned out of enormous seashells.
I love those scuba tanks. That thing is cool.
Weird.
Like
it's so cool.
Bizarre, but it's actually super cool looking. Like, hey, I'm so in touch with the sea. The scuba tanks are seashells. Like,
yes.
I don't know why, but I don't know. That works for me.
It is, yeah, and honestly, I saw this like at 3 p.m. As a kid. I remember seeing this, and I remembered almost nothing about this movie other than how awesome Captain Nemo was here. I don't think I even remembered the Nautilus. All I just remembered was what a mysterious badass Captain Nemo, as played by Herbert Lom, here was. And like I say, I didn't watch it again until after reading the book in this past couple of years. But yeah, he's very strange, and he chooses sort of to bring them all in on the secrets now that he's destroyed the pirates who were coming towards them. Because one thing that they've sort of developed their wonderful living, but they'd love to get rescued, but they're well aware that if pirates come, they're dead. They don't have the capacity to defend themselves against like a bunch of cutthroats and stuff. And so they're
sure they want to get rescued, because their fate could be worse. Because I mean, they're all either one, like either the Union guys, if they get found by Confederate soldiers, or the other guy. But it's like, who's going to rescue? They don't know. So here they're kind of like, well, at least we know we've got a good deal.
No, it's totally true. I mean, two people got married. I mean, they're yeah. they're
They
kicking
have
back.
awesome. By the way, I don't know who the tailor is that set up shop in the on the island, but it's like this amazing leather worker who's able to sew
it's
gorgeous patterns out of leather. I'm like, dude, I can't even do that in my house with a sewing machine and like, you know, all of the technology and electricity, and they're here doing it without even scissors.
Yes.
It's Joan Greenwood's character somehow. I mean, they explicitly state that, but it's some pretty impressive.
They don't get what's interesting is I don't think they don't really get married. We see them lying on the beach, mostly clothed, going, "Oh man, we should get married."
Right.
Like, all right, you know, because I mean, I guess. You know, once a guy rescues you from a giant chicken, you're gonna, you know, you're gonna think of him in a much better light.
Yes.
Although I love all the bits, like when that thing shows up and is chasing them around and knocking things over, and that's the one thing that Harryhausen.
Yeah, you know, we should talk about the giant creatures. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's what. Go ahead, Drew.
Well, before we go too far into the monsters, I wanted to. You know, you were talking about Nemo and like the way they conceived him versus the James Mason in the Disney version, right?
That's right, James Mason. Yes,
James Mason. You know, like the fact that they made him like with the all white beard and everything.
Yes.
Like, is that something from the book?
Yeah, he's supposed to be quote unquote aged, and to be honest, Verne really never makes any sense as far as Verne himself was so confused by the timeline of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and In Search of the Castaways and this book and the fact that he wanted it to fit around the Civil War. He was so confused by the timeline that he has a footnote ostensibly from the editor that says there's a problem here with the timeline, and we just assume that somebody's not telling the truth, and it never resolves. Basically, the timeline is totally screwed up. So yeah, supposedly somehow between 8 years ago when 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea happened, this magical term 8 years, and now Nemo has become so old that he will die soon. And whatever, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter. Let's just presume that maybe he, you know, caught some debilitating disease.
I mean, that's what I would write it if I was gonna make it.
I love the war reporter's crush on Nemo. And how he gets rebuked when they finally meet him. Like that to me, like what is the line of dialogue? You supply the ink and the soldiers supply the blood, or something to the effect of that. I love how butthurt he looks.
Yes.
At that point.
No, it's a really good point. Yeah, and there's all this editorializing from Nemo, who's always so they meet him just to bring the story around. They meet Captain Nemo after he saves them, and they go, "Hey, you're Captain Nemo. You had the Nautilus. Maybe you can rescue us." And Nemo's like, "Well, rescuing's not a bad idea, but the Nautilus shall never take to sea again. It's been damaged." None of us can remember exactly what he says about why it's been damaged, but basically it's not seaworthy. It's seaworthy enough just to float in a lagoon that he's got, and that's it. And who knows why? It was just damaged during one of the adventures, you know, recorded earlier. And so he's been hiding out on this island. By the way, that's totally the case in the book. It's damaged and he can't fix it, and he's not gonna.
But the organ works, so that's
the organ works, and the powers on it work, and all that stuff. Really, the truth of the matter is, you're just supposed to take that because Nemo says yes. Essentially, Nemo's going to die because Nemo wants to die. There's no particular reason that. This guy's a genius. He could probably figure out how to fix his submarine if he wanted to, you know. And they just.
If he can make giant crabs, I'm sure he could fix his.
Absolutely, it's absurd, but you know, it is instead Verne kind of suggesting to us this notion of a once great visionary who is passing into the past, you know, and is leaving the future to this new race of geniuses. Who are, you know, exemplified by these Americans who are engaged in this great war to stop slavery. But Nemo himself, he is always going to be against war, and he's always going to be making huge mistakes. He murders people left and right in the name of peace. And it's, the irony is not lost on Jules Verne or any of the characters that Nemo has zero problem with being judge, jury, and executioner. That's just the way this this character rolls. I do want to get to the monsters, but we should touch on the Nautilus. The Nautilus looks totally different also from the way it had looked in the 1954 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And Harryhausen, who is the big effects guy, he helps create a 10-foot long model that sits in a pretty big miniature cavern with that they show, so that it's a big cavern model, so that when rocks are falling into the lagoon, the splashes won't look super strange. So it's a big model. It looks nothing like it had looked before. I don't think it's a little blocky for my taste. This model, to me, it doesn't look like a super great Nautilus, but it's not bad. And
it's got some touchstones to the original one.
Yeah,
with the fin and the kind of spiky front thing and stuff like that. So I think, but also let's as we segue to the creatures, how cool is it that they get there because they're attacked by a giant bee?
Yes.
Or giant bees. And the way they find it is they're they get walled up and by a giant bees.
Yeah, the young hot couple finds honey, and so then they climb up the wall and they find this giant honeycomb, and they don't go, there was that big chicken and that big crab, so maybe there's a giant bee and we should probably get the hell out of here. No, they're like, let's check this place out.
Oh, look,
giant
honey.
Bee shows up. Giant bee shows up and corners them in one of the little, whatever you call the little rooms that the honeycomb is made of. Yeah. And they're sitting there, and suddenly the bee is like, okay, I think I'm just gonna wall you guys in. And they're like, that's interesting, we're getting walled in. So then they're like, well, luckily I have everything I need to make a fire. I'm just gonna hope that the fire actually melts the wax and before it asphyxiates us in this tiny little chamber. And luckily they worked out fine for them.
Yeah, but on the other side of the honeycomb is the Nautilus in its lagoon. Yeah. Although maybe Nemo's like, look, I'm smart enough to be on the other side. I just get the honey when I can.
Yes, well, and he's. One thing he describes is that he's no longer using the Nautilus to change the world. He's moved on to a new thing where he's going to change the world with his experiments in it's H.G. Wells' Food of the Gods. He's doing experiments in making giant critters so that he can feed the world. So
also unleashing a world full of giant critters. And then when they if this was the Nemo of old, he might have gone, well, look, so I sold you on this whole giant critter thing. But really, once I unleashed all these giant crabs, guess what? War stopped. So I think I've done the world a service with all of these giant bees and crabs that you're fighting. You're not fighting each other. My job here is done. And you can eat them when you want. Let's look at all the honey you got. I mean, some of you die horrible bee-induced deaths, or rended apart by crabs and torn apart by giant rock chickens. But those of you who survive, that's a lot of food. Thank you. You should thank me. I'll accept my award.
Boom.
And I just get the impression that had he survived, that Nemo might have come out.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Because given how he is in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he's a much more benevolent Nemo in this one. But I get the impression that if he could unleash all of those, he's definitely a person who doesn't care about cracking a few eggs.
No, that's absolutely right.
Make an omelet.
It's just like in The Watchmen, how Ozymandias is like, if I have to kill a bunch of people to bring everybody together, I'm not against it. And yeah, I think that's correct. I think
all of your families were torn apart by crabs, but they were really tasty, right? Those of you who survived, everybody who ate some of that crab, pretty good. You can thank Nemo Corporation for that.
Go ahead, Drew.
My question, so we got giant oysters, we have giant crabs.
Yeah.
We only really see a giant chicken.
Yes.
Why not a giant goat or a giant cow? You know, something a little more docile.
It's a super good question.
Just
'Cause
saying.
that's no fun for Nemo. Like, you can't end war with giant cows. I tell you what, giant crabs run across the land. That'll end a war.
What about the people that don't like seafood, though?
No,
Tough luck. You shouldn't have
chicken-
been. Nemo doesn't have to care about that. He's Captain Nemo. He doesn't. The people who don't get to eat the giant crabs and don't like seafood, tough luck.
Well, first of all,
That's
don't
not-
forget
that's not a concern
does
for
make
Nemo.
a giant prehistoric chicken. So you
Well,
got
there you go. See,
yeah.
I mean, it attacks people. It's got like it's built more like a rock or any of those kind of mythical. You know, it's definitely like a prehistoric Rindy kind of attack chicken. But again, you know, you gotta man up. You gotta be a survivor if you're gonna hang out with Nemo.
Can I just point
if
out
you get torn apart by his chickens, you weren't meant for the Nemo verse.
the future, the beautiful new world of Captain Nemo. It's such a nutty idea. This is so nuts. This is the one thing that makes no sense.
Well, he does talk about. I mean, he was gonna bring wheat. Like he has. We don't see as much of that.
Yeah.
And we assume that they are eating and taking advantage of some of this. So he
I
is going to
wanna
bring
know
like crops and stuff like that.
I want to know how he's doing it because they never really, you know, we know he is doing it.
Yeah.
But like, you know, he has all the notes. We see him trying to gather him at the climax of the movie.
Yeah.
But you know, like this sort of steampunk era genetic engineering, you know, like it's all very vague, isn't it?
Yes.
It's got to be fueled by the awesome power of radium, which surely will not harm anyone.
Oh, you're totally right.
At all.
Well, okay. First of all, remember that he's got really astonishing engines in the Nautilus. He's, you know, the backstory, the origin of Captain Nemo, as told in Mysterious Island. So if you read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, you got to wait for the end of Mysterious Island to learn the origin of this character. And basically, he's you know, he's a prince. He's the son of the king. He goes off, or he's the son of a prince, and he goes off to the best colleges of Europe, going place to place, gathering information. He's the smartest of the smart, and he's just amassing all this knowledge, and his just brilliance for science just surpasses everybody he encounters. And so that's why he's able to make the mysterious engines that run the Nautilus. And it doesn't surprise me at all. It probably is a little bit of the weird Nemo energy that he's using to also make giant chickens. He's also made ray guns, by the way.
That's awesome.
You know, you've got extra ray guns in here.
Which is cool because when they bring back the other octopus creature, they get to ray gun it.
Yes.
And let me tell you, man, like with all of this stuff, I gotta say, you know, all of this makes my inner child just so happy.
Yes.
Like all of the stuff is just really fun, cool, things I enjoy. Like, oh look, a giant octopus, oh no, they're being attacked. Look, he's got a ray gun. Shoot the giant octopus.
Definitely a good movie for boys and grown-up boys.
Oh, yeah, Julie,
no doubt about it.
I think you're totally. This is the stuff of like young adventure boy kids, totally. And you know, you're not there. You know, women aren't as well represented usually.
But it's not just, like I said, it's not just about being well represented. It's also about there not being that human drama that tends to, I think, be more attractive to women. You know, it's like I would have liked to have seen the guys have conflict. It's not that there had to be women involved. Mm-hmm. It's just that I would have liked to have seen more of that. I would have liked to have seen more of fear, more of like, okay, desperation. You know, like how are we going to make this work despite everything being against us. Instead, it's kind of like you're saying, it's like, oh, hey, they're literally, and I can get this because they survived, so yay for them, but they're literally singing and dancing when they get to the island, and it's like I'm thinking, okay, maybe figure out how you're going to survive before you celebrate too much. But that's okay. They're happy to be
Maybe
alive.
it's because we see so much conflict in the world right now.
Yeah.
But like watching these like people from opposite ends of the spectrum at a point where the country was like literally divided, I just found that very like, even if it's bullshit, even if it's just like Hollywood bullshit, I enjoyed watching that because it was like it hit like a certain comfort food zone of like, oh, people putting aside their differences to work together towards a common goal of survival.
Yeah.
Wow, it's probably BS, but right now this is the right sort of thing for getting me in my happy place.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Julie. This is definitely the way that these stories play out are definitely aimed at young adult males to, I still enjoy it, so what am I saying?
Young at heart, like, maybe.
Yeah, and young at heart. And I think
grown up boys.
I kind of agree with Drew that this is these kind of island adventures kind of lead to the utopia, I think, of where people think about Star Trek.
Yeah,
and those kinds of futuristic ideals. Maybe we'll get there. I think that making a movie that has a lot of the things that you're talking about, I think in a lot of ways there's more grit to it. There's more stakes and kind of adult human drama. But I would like to see that. But I also am really glad that there's this, which has none of that. And when you want that kind of flavor, when you want to just set aside all of the stuff that's going on, there are these kinds of adventures, and I think that's what it's really aimed at. Having to worry about the world is, and I think probably why I think a lot of boys of a certain age gravitate towards these books is the world can be tough. Here's a breezy adventure that has these kinds of stakes, and guys are taking care of business and solving problems, and it's a different kind of conflict, and I think that's what makes it magic. But I do think you're totally correct in that isn't necessarily the same books that maybe young women would read.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool if I would have loved to, when I was younger, junior high school, there was a girl who was like, I love Jules Verne, Mysterious Island is great, and I love these movies. I would have been like, super cool, that's awesome. Which makes me not understand why there's so many gatekeeper dudes who are like, I bet you don't even know who Dr. X is.
That's
who's really Captain Nemo. Whereas I've always been like, wait, you like this stuff?
Yeah.
You're also a weirdo? Hey, let's hang out,
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand that at all. It's weird to me. I still, and I see it, and I still people tweet about it and everything, and I'm still like, wait, why are you, hey, idiot, why are you this way?
It is very shameful.
Baffling,
kind of that's the sort of toxic part of this. So people will run to, take refuge in stories like this, where people's ingenuity and so forth allow them to get into these adventures and survive. And that's wonderful. And then there's a weird subgroup of people who take that and turn it into something toxic, where they're like, I am smart enough to survive on the mysterious island in my mind, and now I don't want anybody to come. And I wouldn't want Lady Jane, who's a genius in this movie and can shoot and can make clothes and can do all this cool stuff. I wouldn't want Lady Jane and her hot niece to show up, because we're having a good time here, us guys. And if I can just find the orangutan, then everything will be complete. And it's
what, or ask them things like, well, do you even know how to smelt metal? When's the last time you have found how to make food from coconuts? Mm-hmm.
That stuff makes me so sad. But by the way, let me point out yet another difference from the book. These women don't. So in everything we're talking about, like, boy, they sure don't fight very much. It's more that there's much more conflict among them in this movie than in that book.
Holy
And-
moly! I mean, I'm down with that, but that's interesting.
No, I'm just saying the
It's a
movie
long
really is just an excuse for them to go from problem to problem and come up with a natural science solution to it. That's it. Everybody gets along great. The worst they have conflict about is when one of them doesn't want to work and the other goes, "Remember, we're all in this together." And the person goes, "Darn it, you're right. You're right,
Fine.
Captain. You know, holy moly, Captain, we should be working together." And they do. And that's it.
Oh, by the way, something I'd almost forgotten about with the monsters. One thing I think that Harryhausen excelled at in his direction that other stop motion people didn't really seem to get as well is the interactions with humans in the scene.
Yeah.
Like where the guy jumps on the back of the chicken and then how that transition and how he cuts back and forth. You know, we see it in Jason the Argonauts with the skeletons.
Yeah.
And all of
Do you
that
remember
stuff.
the giant? There's a giant in the Argonauts, I think, or maybe it's Seventh Voyage.
Which one has the three-headed
That's-
dragon or whatever it is?
You're talking about the Cyclops or the giant statue?
I think I'm talking about the giant statue, and the hilarious thing about him,
tell us.
and he had so much personality where he would like pick up the building and kind of shake it and do all this like business. And this chicken has a personality too. It's hilarious. It moves side to side, It doesn't
you
like
forget that it's just an animated chicken. It actually feels like it's really part of the
yeah.
Well, and I think that's what it's different than just having a stop motion thing.
Yeah.
He has a lot of interaction, and even the crab where it's obviously it's a model when it's holding Neb, but the way it all kind of fits together.
Well, it helps that they use real crabs for the faces.
The statue fight in Sinbad. All of those bits where they're cutting back and forth and they're having people actually like jump on things or interact. I think that's one of the major things that sets Harryhausen animation apart is
Absolutely
how he pulls the humans into the stop motion stuff. It's pretty fabulous. Having seen a ton of not so great CG or where they'll cut to a CG stunt double and it's kind of just looks like a CG kind of mannequin, is just like, oh man. And even when there's like a doll in one of these and some creature's hand or beneath them or whatever, it's still because of the way he animates and his eye for where to put the camera. It still feels real, like as realistic as you can kind of make that.
Yeah.
And that's just fabulous. I mean, it still looks cool today.
Yeah,
Not all
looks
stop
cool.
motion does, and that's what I think is why Harryhausen's, Harryhausen writ large, right?
I would much rather watch one of these stop motion creatures than a CG creature from about 15 years ago. Absolutely. And because does it look like a real giant chicken? I don't know. I mean, that's just so like not even anywhere near the top of the list of the things that I need for this to be an enjoyable giant chicken. It's the same thing with because you want it to look beautiful and interesting. The same thing with a diorama. You go to a museum, you see a diorama of a bunch of people hanging somebody or something, in some weird Chamber of Horrors sort of wax thing, and they'll have a whole diorama set up. Do those people look like real people? No, they look like wax dummies, with a set. But it's awesome, and it's so much cooler than if you showed me a movie setting of the same thing. There's something neat about the art itself. I think
the fact that the creatures do have, Julie was talking about how you stop thinking of it as like a puppet, you start thinking of it almost as a cast member, because like Harryhausen did a great job of like giving all these creatures individual personalities, which in a way makes them lifelike.
Yeah.
Well, again,
absolutely.
I think, a big part of being, having been a 3D animator, so I'm, railing against some of the stuff I've probably done, but, is you're also an actor, you're also a director. Anytime you're animating at that level, you're putting some of yourself or some, it's funny to go to the animation pit, at work and and I've done this before too, where you see people kind of stomping around or moving or looking in a mirror to get their own expressions for doing lip sync on all of that. Like, you're not just an animator, you're not just moving these bits around, you're also acting through those even if it's a weird character. Working in games, I mean, I ask, hey, there's this weird creature, it's got 2 arms, but then it's got 2 other arms that are these blade arms. What's this thing do? You ask the designer, like, what is it? Regal? Is it gonna creep around? Is it only out at night? Like, all those things, and then it's up to you to figure out like how to make that performance. Harryhausen and his crew just excelled at that.
Yeah. Oh, they really did. And in fact, for my endorsement, there's another Harryhausen thing that I want to recommend. In fact, even though, and I'll say right now, we also recorded several Ray Harryhausen movies a couple of years ago that are some fun conversations. We did several of them.
We just did Earth versus the Flying Saucers last summer.
That's right.
Too.
Which is yet another one. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. Harryhausen's been somebody that we've returned to several times. Interestingly, Herbert Lom in here, who plays Captain Nemo, this is at least the second movie that we have done on this show to feature Herbert Lom.
Have we done the Hammer Phantom of the Opera, which is also Herbert Lom?
No, although that would be a cool one to do.
I mean, that sounds good.
Yeah. That would be cool. Is that there's a 1948 Phantom also that I really enjoy.
That's the Universal.
Yes, that's Claude Rains. I like that one a lot too. So no, we haven't done either of those. But we did do the 1970 Jess Franco Dracula, which everybody hated, but it did have Herbert Lom as Professor Van Helsing. For what it's worth, he's always good. And then he would also be really funny in the Pink Panther films. So this move, is there a creature that we missed? Because there's the crab, there's the giant chicken, there's the bees, which are terrifying.
There is a giant octopus because
which they ray gun.
Yes.
Every
right.
Captain Nemo movie has to have a giant octopus.
Yes, and in this case, it's another prehistoric. So let's just go with the notion that for whatever reason, Captain Nemo has not just been making giant creatures; he's making giant prehistoric creatures. Who knows why? And in this case, it is a proto-octopus that has a giant shell. And the way this effect is done was really neat. They had to animate the tentacles even slower than they would normally, and with a little bit more of a wider curl, so that when it was played back, it would look like the tentacles were moving against water pressure.
Right.
And then they used this effect of like a smokiness filter plate across the film lens to make it appear as though it's underwater. And the funny thing is, when I'm watching it, I forget all that. I'm like, hey, it's underwater. I'm totally down with the notion that this is an underwater octopus. It never even dawned on me, even though it makes no sense at all, that this big toy octopus is not in a tank of water. Of course it's not.
Now I'm gonna complain about one thing that I've complained about in another film that we watched. What was the other film that we watched where there was underwater fighting with people in wetsuits?
Zombies of Moratau.
Oh my God, how could I forget that?
Okay.
Anyway, that one, the same thing of that they don't, for whatever reason, they choose to film reactions of people's faces behind the helmet in a completely different way than they film the action scene from farther back, so that you see a person screaming or whatever, looking like they're in agony, like they've been grabbed by the octopus. In this case, it's the Confederate guy, but when you pull back, he's like being thrown around, but when you're showing him, he's completely still, but just yelling. So I'm like, why not just move the camera around or something so it looks like that the guy's moving? I didn't understand that at all. It was just like, it looks like completely two different scenes. Like, okay,
no,
this
you're
guy's
right.
over here yelling, and then that guy's getting thrown around by an octopus. Anyway,
you're right. And modern
convenience.
I mean, modern continuity people would basically keep track of saying that you filmed the guy from a certain angle before, and so now you're going to film their face, but you need to figure out ways to continue the eye line somehow, so that we don't feel lost when we cut to that person's face.
Right.
But that's no, I agree. It's a problem. That's a problem that films have, and you can only combat it by thinking through this stuff like super duper carefully, you know. And you do find a lot of that problem in things like this, where you have an underwater fight and then you cut to the actors, or you have a cockpit of a jet fighter and then you cut to the actor in the cockpit. Yeah, I don't know. This is hard, and yeah. So we get to the end pretty quickly because what's happening is they have to, they've built this wonderful Shangri-La all for themselves, even better than the one that's in the book, because they even have female companionship, so they have a whole society and they're good to stay forever essentially, except for that the island is going to explode, and so all their work is going to be destroyed. And Captain Nemo would like to get off the island so he can share. I said earlier that he's going to die because he's going to die, but actually there's a problem here, because he also wants his scientific discoveries to escape with him. And so they come up with this big plot where they're gonna fix the pirate ship and then float away. But then it turns out they don't have time, because the Nemo did his figures wrong, and the volcano is going to explode the whole island in a matter of hours. And so at the very end, they come up with a big plan. Wait, let's just float the ship using a balloon inside the hull. I have no idea if that plan would work. None. I have no idea.
They do similar things raising ships. Because it depends on how wrecked it is, right?
Sure.
I mean, I doubt it would work the way it does in the movie, regardless. But I think the idea of it overall has merit.
I'm sure it does, because this is an idea more or less that is going to get ripped off in Raise the Titanic. In Raise the Titanic, instead of blowing up a big balloon inside the hull, they use a pipe to pipe ping pong balls, which are already full of air, into the hull. Not a bad plan. And the idea is it would raise the ship. They didn't know when that book was written that the ship had been torn in half. So that screws it all up. So assuming that you had a complete hull and enough of a solid body so that you could blow something up inside of it and it would have buoyancy and press against the top of that solid body and push it to the surface. Okay. Yeah, you're right. So that plan works. And the problem is that the only man not to make it out is Nemo, who is, I remember being so frustrated by this when I saw this as a 12-year-old or whatever. Nemo gets basically killed inside the Nautilus. He's not able to escape. He's killed by falling equipment and all that stuff. And that's it. That's the end of Captain Nemo.
And part of that makes there's a certain poignancy to it, but also, kind of what Julia was saying about adding some meat to it. I think there could have, it's not this movie, but also, Nemo built this ship. This is his ship.
Yes.
So there's a certain amount, and he's steadfast in that. It's as much a part of him as any of his limbs in a lot of ways. Considering it's damaged at the end of 20,000 Leagues, and then which is probably why it's inoperable here. You could see a little bit more possible pathos with him realizing that he'll never, once he leaves behind the Nautilus. Which has been as much a companion as anyone in his life.
Yes.
And that's not part of this film.
No.
But you could do a decent amount with that as well, if you wanted to, because it's such a big, that can have been an easy choice. He's a pragmatist, so he's like, well, it's going to get volcanoed regardless. I'd rather not be here when it gets volcanoed. Of course, that doesn't happen. He gets trapped. Trying to get his knowledge, right? Out to the world, which is a different Nemo than the one we see, especially in the movie version of 20,000 Leagues.
That's right. No, you're absolutely
It's way more of a villain, almost like a Ming the Merciless in some weird way. It's my way and I do what I want. Guess what? Because I'm Captain Nemo.
Yeah, and there's a whole, like the best supervillains, he's got a whole reasoning behind that and a big revenge plot and all that stuff. But yeah, basically, that's totally correct. And the only reason the other people survive, and at the end of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the book, is he's like, the ship's going to go down in the big storm, and I'm putting you guys on a lifeboat so that you can go and tell the tale of of Captain Nemo, and that's what happens here. So in the book Mysterious Island, they do manage to survive in much the same way. Well, no, they try. It's a much more long, drawn out thing, and Nemo just dies in his sleep of old age, basically. And then they're trying to build. Yeah, no, he tells his whole origin story, and Verne is not necessarily following like a Hollywood 3-act structure, and it doesn't really matter to him whether things kind of peter out. And so Nemo tells an exciting long story and then dies in his sleep. There is a lot of really great suspense at the end of the book, but it's totally different from this, and it has to do with a lot of stuff set up towards the middle of the book that doesn't even. I don't even want to waste your time with it. If anybody wants to engage with me about the book Mysterious Island and how the end works out there, nevertheless, after all of the machinations, you do wind up exactly where you do here, which is the people who are on the island get off the island. Nemo does not. And
does the orangutan make it off the island in the book?
No, the orangutan sacrifices himself, but the dog makes it. So.
Well, there's that. At least he didn't. At least it wasn't Nemo going orangutan Operation Protocol 43, and the orangutan goes nuts and kills everyone. Which would be totally in character for 20,000 Leagues Nemo. Maybe not so much this one.
If I recall, the orangutan, whose name is Jupe, actually, I think he dies fighting the pirates. And that's a shame. It is because the pirates make landfall, and there's a big war against the pirates, who you barely see at all in this movie. But it's remarkable that they're in there at all.
Sure.
Yeah.
I almost felt bad for the pirates in this movie because they're just like, "Hey, island! Oh shit, we just got sunk."
They shell the crap out of those people.
I know. It's kind of awful.
They had previously left one of their
they were jerks.
Die.
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that. The fact that they find this awesome cave full of
we talked about that because
you didn't talk about the hanging dude, did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I missed that part. Sorry.
It's all right. So it's totally right. Yeah, Ayrton, who, like I said,
that's what it was. Yeah, Ayrton.
In the book is a full character who they that's one of the conflicts is what to do with Ayrton, because when they find him, he's a wild man, but because they are modern scientific thinking Americans, they debate amongst one another and decide then to reform him, and they make him into a good man once again. And so then, once reformed, he becomes an upstanding member of the crew, although he mainly hangs out and herds the goats, and then he's important in fighting off the pirates.
Which is
those goats were
back
awesome.
to Treasure Island, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
There's definitely touchstones to that. I'm glad they did that and not like, well, to survive, to prove your worth, you have to fight Jupe.
To fight the orangutan.
We'll let you live, but
they have he stays. Ayrton lives in the barn.
King Kong thing.
It's so funny because Ayrton lives in the barn way down near the beach, across the river, and they have a whole drawbridge that they've built, and as I mentioned, they have a telegraph, and so Ayrton is able to telegraph them when the pirates are getting close.
That's very much like King Kong. Well, and then I know that they have that the log is an homage to King Kong, the big log that they cross.
Oh, totally. Good point. Yes. Yeah. And in fact,
I guess in the book they're just like, dude, whatever you do with the goats, we're gonna just go. You have a telegraph. I don't want to know anything about that. Just go be a wild man. Sometimes we're gonna need to milk the goats and get the milk and make cheese and stuff. But just
quite so.
Further down the beach is fine for you.
So that is the end of the Amazing Mysterious Island. So I want to get people's thoughts, and I'm really curious what your recommendations for the week will be. And I say that because I've been thinking about other Harryhausen stuff that we may not have touched on, but I want to know like what you've got to recommend. So let's get the same order as before. Julia, it was we'll switch it around to the way we did it earlier. Julia, Tony, Drew, and then I'll go. So Julia, final thoughts, and as this conversation, added any color to your thoughts on Mysterious Island?
Well, I mean, I appreciate knowing that that this is a film designed for boys and grown-up boys, because it kind of makes me go, okay, so it's not meant for me, therefore it's fine that I don't necessarily get a lot out of it. I do think that there's some neat art, some neat effects. I like the let me think. There was something that I was super impressed by, and now I'm losing. Well, the color. Oh, that's what it was. I was going to say, I think it's neat that in the films now they I think it's neat that there's so much color in that film, because in films now, if you have an outdoor film and on an island, they're not going to find any reason except maybe a nice sunset to give you any color other than tan and green, and here there's just, not only is there beautiful flowers and everything, but there's just gorgeous colors in the caves and gorgeous colors in the Nautilus. I mean, I just thought that was really fun. So I like that they do that. That's a little different. It's fine that it's not super realistic to how actually things would have been if this had gone down the way it did. But it's fine, and I'm glad to be visiting some Captain Nemo stuff in honor of Jason's Young Captain Nemo book coming out here from Macmillan Books on March 12th. Get your copy from Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Anyway, yeah. So that was it was fun, and that's all.
Okay, awesome. Then thank you. Tony, thoughts, Mysterious Island?
Like I said, I really dig this movie. I find it interesting, and I'm really glad that it's this cast back together, because growing up as I never thought of it as not something girls or women would like, and I find it interesting. Like that's something like Julia brings up a really good point. Like when I think about it that way, oh yeah, that is really aimed at. There's a certain audience, of course. I hope that if it does speak to you, regardless of age or gender, that it still speaks to you. But things have their purposes and their target audiences overall, and I don't know, there's nothing wrong with that. I really like it. There was a sort of remake / whatever, Journey to Mysterious Island with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson,
right?
And I think it's interesting that you bring up the Technicolor just vibrancy, which I find that's another thing I love about this era, is that
no doubt
super vibrant Technicolor. Like even the credits, everything just looks great. You brought up an interesting point that a lot of times now we go with kind of a more realistic, like if you put a camera and film the jungle, you take your camera down to the Amazon, it doesn't have this just lushness, this oversaturation.
Yeah.
Except for maybe something like the reason I had to look it up, like this Mysterious Island from 2012, where you get that vibrancy if it's a kids movie a lot of times. And ostensibly this may be a kids movie, and maybe that's why people think of it that way. I'm fascinated when you brought up, hey, I wish there was more conflict. I wish this was more of an adult movie. I think if it was made with that, you would get a more somber color palette, or a more kind of desaturated color palette, as opposed to adventure movie. Come bring your kids on Kids Day, or whatever, which is kind of where the newer one is as well. Things like Jumanji, which have a way brighter palette because they're kids movies. So I find it interesting that they're, whenever there's adventure for perhaps a younger target audience, it's way more vibrant. I still like seeing that. And again, that could be just because that's what I grew up with. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear more. I don't know I have zero idea of the demographics of this, who listens to this podcast. I'm guessing it's older, but people around our age, just given what I've seen, online and everything. But I'd be curious, how people think of it. Of course, I mean, I work with people half my age all the time at work, and everybody seems to dig adventure-y stuff and vibrant things like that. I don't know.
I've heard from a lot of 20-somethings. I've heard from a lot of people who are certainly a generation down from me, where they're professionals and young professionals and a lot of people who are like who are working but who are young who are younger.
Right.
So
Well,
I don't know.
I'm just curious if Technicolor is the vibrant Technicolor a thing that says, "Oh, that's an old movie. Why do I bother?" Or
good
if
question.
it's still seen as this looks really cool and neat. I enjoy how Technicolor looks even in this day and age where you can dial in whatever the hell color you want. I mean, color grading digitally gives you a palette people when filming this film couldn't even conceive of, being able to do. So I would be curious what the overall kind of consensus is, but I don't
Those
know.
fakes have gotten much better. I mean, for instance, if you watch Documentary Now, they now have figured out how to. You can just fake up the texture and color of old film very easily, and it's looking perfect.
Absolutely.
And
I mean,
that didn't used to be possible,
you can get that for free right now. Like there's a suite of stuff by Black Magic that Resolve that you can get a free version of, and you can pull in your videos off your phone and start color grading it to look,
beautiful.
You can make it look like Payback, or you can make it look, I don't know. I mean, I think you'd have to work to get the Technicolor look, because that's a whole process and everything. I mean, I'd be curious, but if you could reproduce that, that'd be interesting. But I don't know. I've kind of gone off the rails on my final thoughts.
Oh, Tony, I think it's fabulous. I mean, I'd like to see, by the way, whether you could take phone video. I know you could, but like, what would be the process to create this sort of muddy, poor, like Super 8 color of the late 60s and 70s?
Well, I tell you what, you can. So like if you want to try it, you probably have a decent computer at least. Just download DaVinci Resolve and go to town. The learning curve is a little bit like you have to learn it, but just the fact that that's free, and that's not even like exactly
right. That's not commercial grade, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they have one that is, but the fact that people have access to that for free is
there's a
amazing.
thing that I used to, Drew. I promise we're getting to your final thoughts in a minute, but I was just thinking. It took me a long time to like actually start looking at the way films look as being one of the things that I thought was charming or cool or worthy of study. It took a long time. Maybe I'm slower than other people, but I mean, I remember I was like out of school and living in Austin, and the first time I got a copy of Tomb of the Blind Dead, I took it back because I was like, this movie looks hideous and not that interested. And then the next time I got it, like several months later, somehow I had picked up on Eurotrash and what it all looks like. And I go, this movie looks the way it does because of context and because of, the art looks like this. It's because of this. And in the context, all of a sudden it was like there was an optometrist who had been flicking different discs in front of my eyes. And suddenly it was like, now I see. And so what I did think was terrible, now I saw in the context and I could enjoy it. And it would have to be that way for young people looking at Technicolor and going, oh, right, I like it. And also it makes sense in context. Otherwise, I think it would be kind of weird. And I'd love to hear from younger people, about like what your thoughts are encountering what older films look like. And yeah, that would be really cool to hear about. Mr. Drew, go anywhere you want because we're off the rails. It doesn't matter. What are your final thoughts?
Are you still with us?
Anything else?
Did you ask? Did Julia just ask if I was asleep?
No, I said, are you still with us? Did you leave? Did we scare you off?
I just, I'm normally very, very wordy on this show, but I just thought I would let him go and not interject because sometimes you just gotta. Fair is fair, right? I mean, I like to run my mouth.
I wasn't insinuating that you weren't participating, just that they were blabbing a whole lot.
Oh no! I didn't think you were. I just was saying I was prepared to let him get that sort of stream of consciousness thing out of his system.
Well, how do you really feel? Jeez, man.
No, it was interesting. It was good.
Yeah, no, I was into it. So how do I really feel about the Mysterious Island? I really like this movie. I again, this was. I remember watching this movie the first time with my siblings, and going into the woods, and even mimicking the fight with the big crab in the woods.
Are you serious? Oh, that's
Yeah,
so
like
cool.
yeah, like I think I actually, out of the whole Captain Nemo film canon, I probably have rewatched this more than the Disney one, oddly. I really just I love this movie. It's a fun Ray Harryhausen movie. It's a fun example of sci-fi adventure, like that genre. It's funny, like everything about it. It's almost a perfect setup for a dinosaur movie, except we have giant regular animals instead of dinosaurs. So it fits in well with that sort of tradition as well. So I don't know. It just hits a lot of my happy buttons, and makes me feel nostalgic in the right way. And I don't really think I have anything other that to add other than that. I kind
I
of
think
feel
that's
about
fabulous.
it the same way that Tony does.
Yeah, wonderful. And my final thought is I am so thrilled. I don't know what our schedule is going to be over the next couple of weeks, but this is the very first movie that turned me on to Captain Nemo. And, it took me a really long time, but I have a book series coming out about Captain Nemo. So that's a really strange trip to have gone from seeing Herbert Lom walk out of the sea to having a book where Captain Nemo is a part of it. So that's it's not now. My character is the great grandson, but still, it's in that universe. And in fact, just now I got a ping on my computer, and if you can believe this, Young Captain Nemo 1 is coming out in March, but my computer just popped up with some of the bookstores are now carrying the placeholder for Young Captain Nemo 2 Quest for the Nautilus, which comes in March of 2020. And Quest for the Nautilus is literally what it sounds like. They have 72 hours to follow some clues to find the location of the lost Nemo ship Nautilus. And
I'm going to be severely disappointed if it's not piloted by Jupe.
I'm going to get that. You know what? I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to get that orangutan into one of these books. I am. Oh,
I'm pretty
man.
sure the second one's done, so it's gonna be up to the third one.
Yes, but that's okay.
Is he going to be a Dr. Zaius like genius orangutan?
Maybe he will.
So.
Well, maybe he will have been augmented or something. See, in the second book, at one point they actually return to this island, which they're still using as one of their bases. Yes. Well, I won't tell you when.
2020 even. Long. You set the lead, man.
I'm already spoiling the fact that yes, Young Captain Nemo survives the first book.
Oh, sorry. I was wondering.
Man.
But anyway, this was such a blast. I loved watching Herbert Lom with you guys, and this was super fun. So yeah, let's do endorsements. I want to hear what you guys have to talk about. Julia, I know that you've spent the last week watching like 1,000 hours of The Americans.
Well,
but,
I had already endorsed that a few weeks ago because I had started binge watching it. So I suppose it wasn't true binge watching because it's taken me this long to get through it, but it is 6 seasons. So I guess for like a month for 6 seasons is not too bad. But anyway, yes, that was awesome, and it was heartbreaking at the end, but whatever. And then also we've endorsed before the Orville, but these last couple episodes I've really enjoyed because basically, the Orville's just been what I would consider to be a big homage to Star Trek, and specifically Star Trek: The Next Generation. And now they've introduced their Borg kind of character, like a species. So it's gotten really exciting because it's been kind of lighthearted up until now, but now it's kind of terrifying. Like the last couple episodes were dark. really dark. So anyway, so if you're into Star Trek, you will really enjoy the Orville. It's a very good show. I'm trying to think if I've seen any movies. I don't think I've seen anything that I'm really excited to endorse. But yeah, so that's just been my thing, is just finishing up The Americans and watching New Orville. We watched a new episode of Documentary Now, which was really fun, like Jason was saying.
Oh my
So
gosh,
yeah, those are my things that I'm into.
cool. Thank you. We've had a lot of snow over the past couple of days, so
Yeah, I'm
everybody's
pretty
just
over
sort
it.
of been hunkered down inside the
Negative,
house. And,
something like -8 degrees last night. Like, no thanks.
I can't even imagine that.
and a lot of snow. So yeah. Tony, did you have anything to endorse?
Yeah, renting this led me to Amazon to suggest Mutiny in Outer Space, which is a cool sci-fi show where there's a fungus attacks people on a space station. For my birthday, I also got the super groovy Green Slime movie, and so both of those,
it takes everything not to sing that damn song every time I
know
that.
It's so catchy and awesome. Yeah, I would like to do some kind of double feature podcast of those two, just because they fit together really well. And also, it was interesting that, Jason, you said this movie was your introduction to Captain Nemo. I think I did see the Disney movie, the 20,000 Leagues movie, but growing up, the Captain Nemo that I knew was a cartoon that they showed on Captain Kangaroo.
Oh my gosh.
The Undersea Adventures of Captain Nemo, which are like these 5-minute things that we would see in either like kindergarten or early grade school. I'm hoping that they're somewhere on the internet, although I think, or a DVD release, I would totally
Not
buy
only
that.
are they somewhere on the internet, Tony, but I actually posted some of it on my blog about a week ago.
Oh man, I need to get that.
You're in luck.
There's a DVD series, but I don't know. I'll have to look at it on Amazon to see if people are scalping it for crazy town prices. And also there was The Return of Captain Nemo by Irwin Allen, and written by people like Robert Bloch. And I remember that. I rewatched part of it, and man, it's not super good.
That was like Jose Ferrer, right?
Yes.
As Nemo, yeah.
As Nemo.
I forgot
remember
about that
more because my older stepbrothers did not want to watch it and would always watch. I want to say that it came on opposite of like Grizzly Adams at the time. And this means nothing for people not of our generation.
No, but you're singing a very cool song. I'm loving it.
But so this was more, when I actually saw Return of Captain Nemo, it was not as good as I had imagined as a kid, because I just saw the bits, the ads, and then I only caught a couple of episodes at the time. But those are both, I think, on DVD, and are worth noting. Hey, if you're out there looking for more Nemo stuff, there's a cartoon and also The Return of Captain Nemo, which may not hold up as well. Some 78 TV budget, but man, does it try. So
I believe you can see it on YouTube. I can't remember if you can or not. I rented it in the last year.
I'll try to. I'll have to. hopefully if it's on DVD, it'll be at a library or whatever. Me. I'm trying to. I try to send money to whoever I can who worked on things, if possible, rather than.
Yeah. I think you can rent it from Amazon. I mean, you can rent that thing.
Cool.
It's available, and it has the feel of true, like Irwin Allen style 1970s TV sci-fi. Like some CIA guys are assigned to like be the liaisons with the Nautilus, and it's some nonsense. It's wonderful. I really, I can't remember right now how impressive it is, but it's certainly enjoyable. Good tip. Oh yeah, and the Captain Kangaroo thing, those are amazing. Those are just really, really neat. Yeah. Wow. Those are great recommendations. Thank you, Tony. Drew, what do you got?
Well, about a week or so back, I watched Overlord, which is it's a relatively recent film. It's from last year on Amazon, and it got kind of ignored in the theaters. I remember it kind of came and went, but it's another kind of weird war setup. This one involves soldiers paratrooping in on the eve of D-Day into Nazi-occupied France, and of course they run across that old chestnut of mad scientists, which are creating Nazi zombies. So in a way, it's kind of a throwback to some exploitation type horror films from like the 70s and 80s that would follow that through line, but it's played rather more seriously. And actually, strangely, or perhaps not strangely at all, a lot of the sort of human drama that Julia was saying that Mysterious Island was lacking, Overlord has all of the arguing in a war movie that you could ever want. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it's a good time waster, and if you're wanting your Nazi punching entertainment in our current political climate, this will definitely hit your happy buttons of seeing Nazis murder-lated. So Overlord.
I got to see it at Fantastic Fest, and I gotta say it's probably the best. It's probably the best Wolfenstein movie we'll get. Like, if you wanted a good Castle Wolfenstein movie, this is pretty damn good. I lucked out and also got the poster for it too. So
the poster is actually really cool. It also it could also kind of work as a top secret Captain America prequel. Like,
oh sure,
yeah. I like this kind of genre, so I really, even though a lot of the movies that do it, they're not particularly well done. They're usually just kind of exploitive. This is probably a cut above that. But I was kind of disappointed when I looked more into it that it didn't do quite well in the theater, because I think you always hear people like, oh, where are the R-rated horror films? Then someone makes something like this, which is seemingly aimed right at horror fans, and it gets ignored. So I'm doing my small part to get the word out about it now.
Oh yeah, man, it was super fun. It's exactly the movie it wants to be, and it does all of that exactly how you want it to be, in my opinion. It was a blast at Fantastic Fest, and I was super glad they brought it. I enjoyed it a lot. I just think it's a shame that didn't do. It should have. I mean, I know a lot of people went to go see it when it came out, but that doesn't. Living in a film town doesn't mean much. Like you can't really gauge if basically, like, I'm kind of in a bubble of like, oh man, go see this cool thing, and then you have like-minded friends who do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean it's super fun, and there's a lot of really crap Nazi zombie movies.
Yeah, they are.
There's some where like the makeup effects are good, but the movie is just awful and crummy. And this does a balance of like, yeah, it's still fun, looks really good. It does everything, and exactly what you said, Drew. It's it could be a lost Captain America movie if you want it to be.
I remember the trailers for it, and maybe this is why that was off-putting. Where I remember the tagline was "Love horror but hate Nazis," and I was thinking like, well, that describes, I think, a large, yeah. So maybe that seemed a little more campy than the movie actually is, because it doesn't really play the scenario for camp. Like it plays its pulpiness more or less. It's not a drag. Like, it's a fun movie to watch, but it plays its pulpiness pretty straight face. So I think maybe the trailers, or at least the some of the trailers, might have made it seem a little more campy than it actually is, and it's not. And I don't know. I'm glad to see that Tony is also enthusiastic about it, because I hope some of our listeners, it is available on Amazon for rental, and I'm sure you can get it through a lot of other services. I hope some of our listeners check it out, because I think it was deserving of a bigger audience that it got.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I try to cover everything I can for Fantastic Fest for the show. I thought I had mentioned it, but if I haven't, then I'm gonna, I definitely want to throw my hat in the ring with Drew. And it's exactly the movie you want it to be. If you're like, man, I want to see some people shooting up Nazi zombies. Man, oh man, you got it.
Wow. Well, cool. All right. And my recommendation, actually, I have two. Now, one is something that I just read today that's been on my shelf for a long time, and I have no explanation for that at all. But there's a writer named Sean Fitzgibbon who's a comic artist and writer, and I read his graphic novel Domesticated, which is a series of horror stories that are tied together by a black cat who just moves from story to story.
Isn't that Cat's Eye?
Very much like Cat's Eye, except for that it's all very modern, and most of them take place, in and around a city that looks a lot like New York, and it's really cool. And one of the stories is even a modern day retelling of the Black Cat. Fabulous. I really enjoyed it, and I just wanted to share. It was called Domesticated, and I thought it was a neat horror graphic novel. The other thing is something that I only learned about today. It is blowing my mind, and I don't know enough about it except for that it is real. Okay, you guys have heard us talk about the Marilyn Ross Dark Shadows books. Marilyn Ross being a made-up name for Dan Ross, who wrote a bunch of Gothic novels, including books based on Dark Shadows. Fine. Anyway, those books have not been reprinted, and they're still not planned to be reprinted. But for some reason, Amazon is now advertising audio readings of them. So audiobooks of the 1960s Dan Ross Dark Shadows books are going to start coming out, I kid you not, at the end of March 2019, this month.
That's hilarious.
It is
blowing.
Who's doing the
vote?
I know nothing about them other than that Amazon is selling them. I don't know who's doing this. I don't know if it's the Dan Ross estate. I don't know if it's a bunch of pirates who for some reason decided we're going to release a bunch of Dark Shadows audiobooks. I don't know anything about where the heck these are coming from other than that they are selling them. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I'm going to try and reach out to these guys and get them in for an interview because I want to know what the heck is going on. How did they manage to do this? Is it a hoax? Will it be real? It's like several weeks from now, so we'll find out soon enough. But I am so excited by the notion that people are going to be able to somehow or another get these stories again without having to find a cool used bookstore like Fahrenheit's here in Denver, or finding them on the internet around the country. So that's cool. And that's
I'm still hoping to get Mallory O'Meara's Lady from the Black Lagoon. I have to wait till Tuesday, and I'm super stoked because Black Lagoon those movies were one of my favorite retrospectives.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
We got to try to get her on the podcast as well.
Yes, I've actually reached out to her publisher, so hopefully they'll get back to me. We'll hope for the best.
Bummed
Never know.
I can't go in Austin. They're doing a screening of Creature, and she's going to be signing books. And both of those are things that I really dig. And I'm sad that I can't see Creature on the big screen due to just conflicts of stuff going on.
Sure.
And I bought tickets and then realized I had conflicts and I had to refund them. And now I'm really sad I didn't sell those tickets to Drew instead. Terrible friend.
Not hardly. Please.
But I was just like, no. I bought tickets as soon as they came on because I was like, Creature on the big screen, an author's going to be there. This is going to be all the things. And then now it's for a good cause that I'm missing this. I'm supporting my wife and getting some of her music played, her classical music played.
Very exciting.
Awesome.
It was one of those things where you're like, oh man, I want to see Creature on the big screen.
Yeah.
At the Draft House, no less, which is, where I would want to see it. So, oh well. But yeah, full report on the book, and hopefully we'll have an interview. That would be really awesome. Just because
I hope so.
Creature is so near and dear to my heart.
I don't know those guys, so I've sent them a note. You never know if they'll listen. I may have to figure out another way to ping them and say, listen, you're going to get a good interview from us. So I'll do what I can. And that's it for this week. I am so excited we got a chance to talk about Mysterious Island. You guys were so wonderful with this, and it was a delight. And We will be back together very soon to talk about some more crazy Captain Nemo stuff. And those of you listening, tell your friends, bring them along, come to the Facebook page, engage with us, and we will talk to you soon. Everybody have a fantastic week.
Well behave on this time. No hold people hostage, no chains.
I'm trying super hard to turn over a new leaf. So
don't all the Eye of Sauron.
All right.
You're not supposed to bring it up, Drew.
Well, I was kind of surprised because I thought after the Hellraiser films he might have been all like jumped up on chains and torture, and instead he's very mild mannered.
I'm in the era of good feeling. That's where I am right now. So okay, guys, have a fantastic week. I am so thankful that you would be here. By the way, leave a review. Leave a review on iTunes. Makes a difference. Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Night.
Night.
Night.